The stories shared on It Takes Balls are unique to the individual sharing. Always speak with your trusted medical provider for treatment options specific to you. Welcome back to It Takes Balls, presented by Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. Today I'm joined by Mike Knebel. He said it was like Knievel, so I think I got it right. Mike, thank you so much for being here.
You got it correct, and thanks again for having me. I wish it was under different circumstances, but it's important to share our stories and our victories when it comes to testicular cancer.
Yeah, as our friend of TCAF would say, Brian Vassal, he'd say we're ball brothers. So, so Mike, before we get into your testicular cancer story, tell me a little bit about who you are as a person.
Well, certainly. So I am a dad and a husband here in Nebraska, and a very reluctant Nebraska Cornhusker football fan. But I'm somebody who's worked in finance for 15 plus years, and my heart and the work that I typically do outside of work is working with husbands and fathers and making sure that they are the best versions of themselves. So my heart is really to encourage men to take care of themselves and to be the best versions to take care of others as well.
Awesome. So you're the perfect guest to be on here. So yeah, let's talk about your testicular cancer story. I know you were diagnosed at 41, which some places say testicular cancer is most common 15 to 35. We say 15 to 44. So you're still kind of in that range, but up in the upper end. So tell me about like what led to your diagnosis.
Well, certainly. So prior to the diagnosis, a few months prior to it, I ran my first half marathon, and I'd been training off and on. And I use the phrase training a little bit because I wasn't running as hard as I should have been up until the week prior to the half marathon. And shortly after I got finished with that, about the week afterwards, I started just feeling a lot of pain and a lot of discomfort in the groin. And I thought, well, this is why you don't run marathons, because this is what's going to happen, especially if you're over 40. And so I just kind of wrote it off as I screwed something up while I was running. Couple weeks later, excuse me, I was doing a self-examination and I felt what was like a lump. It kind of felt like a small marble down there. And I still wasn't putting it off to cancer or anything. I thought, again, I had injured something. There was torsion, something got tore. And so I just, like most men, said, well, I'm going to put it off for a little bit, and we'll see how things go over the course of the summer. Leading up to the diagnosis that August, it was just the occasional back pain, occasional, testicular and groin pain. But I think it was getting closer to August when I started to get concerned because the lump wasn't going away. My wife is a nurse, and she is amazing nurse. And she was trying to reassure me, like, hey, we see a lot of different things here. Don't jump to cancer right away. It could still be this, but the best thing to do is to go in and get checked. And I'm very grateful that I did go in and get checked. It was from the moment I noticed the lump to actually going into my primary care was 3 months. And the urologist and oncologist I work with say that typically what they see in guys is anywhere between 6 to 9 months, if not longer, for them to go in after first noticing a lump. So because early detection and I went in such a short time frame, even though 3 months felt like an eternity at times, it really helped in the diagnosis because I ended up having a stage 1A diagnosis on that first one.
Gotcha. Okay. So you said you're doing a self-exam. Was that something that you were regularly doing, or you did it just as a result of the pain you were feeling?
It was as a result of the pain I was feeling. It was not something that I had normally done. Being 41 when I was diagnosed, I kind of grew up with the Tom Green song about, hey boys, feel your balls. And I was like, well, occasionally I'll do a self-exam, but it was not something that was part of any type of regular checkup.
Yeah. So tell me about that visit to the doctor that ultimately led to your orchiectomy.
Well, I have to say that I was blessed going into the visit with this doctor because in the group that I work with, it's called the Dad Edge Alliance. I become really good friends with a couple of guys in there who had actually gone through testicular cancer. And I write a little bit about them in the book, but they had told me about their journeys and the different things that they had gone through. So I knew going in, if this was going to be cancer, what kind of questions to ask and what to expect. What I still was unprepared for was the quick turnaround time on your initial diagnosis and visit to, hey, we're going to schedule that surgery. We're going to be, removing a testicle. The primary care, he initially passed it off as fluid or a cyst. He goes, but we'll do the ultrasound. And the ultrasound results came back pretty quickly. I just remember getting the call with my wife in the room. We were back at home, and they mentioned that it was a mass, most consistent with, malignant activity. And it was just, when you start hearing the words that are related to cancer, you're like, oh, okay, well, this is real. This is absolutely real now. It was kind of a whirlwind because we were diagnosed, and then 2 weeks later I'm in surgery.
So when you first heard that it was likely testicular cancer, you said you'd known those guys that had been through it. Did knowing those guys kind of help you kind of brace for the news when it hit, or was it still kind of a shock when you had heard it?
It helped me brace for the news. It really did. And that's one of the reasons why I've been so vocal since my diagnosis on early detection, writing a book, everything, is because I had a group of friends who I knew what to expect. I knew bad case scenarios. I knew all of these different things going in. So when they said cancer, I knew right away, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have to lose a testicle. What does that look like? And it helped me prepare for, okay, maybe there's going to be chemo. Maybe there's going to be radiation. Maybe there's going to be some of these other things. And so I was a bit calmer because I knew that cancer didn't mean an end to my lifestyle. It didn't mean an end to a variety of things. It just meant it was going to be an additional challenge.
And your kids at this time, are they old enough to know that you've been diagnosed with cancer? Or is it still too early to tell?
So it was within the couple of weeks afterwards that we mentioned cancer, but my kids were a few years younger. I mean, right now my daughter is almost 14. My son is 11. So, my son being at 8 at the time, it was not something we wanted to get too deep into, but we just wanted to say, hey, the doctors found something. The good news is they're going to be able to cut it out, and we're going to be able to, get back to being healthy again. So it was that's how we spoke to it about my son. My daughter was something that we did mention cancer a little bit more. I would say it took probably another year before I started talking to them and saying the word testicular cancer, because it's just, as I talked about in the book, it's a serious thing, but also you never know when you can say the word testicle in front of certain people, and have it be talking about medical things. There's just a lot of different connotations with the word.
Yeah. Let's talk about your recovery from the orchiectomy. Was it pretty smooth sailing, or was there any notable events for that?
I'd have to say that the recovery itself was actually pretty smooth. There was a little bit of nerve issue. So in the incision part, to this day, there's still a little bit of numbness, and we're coming up on 3 years since that. So that took a little bit of getting used to, but everything else, again, very, very fortunate that my wife is a nurse who for many years worked in rehab. So she was able to be there by the side of my bed when I came out of surgery, and be able there to answer all sorts of questions that I had, for the month in recovery. So it did go pretty smoothly.
It's good to hear that your wife was a good caretaker. My wife's a great caretaker too. She's a nurse too. She wasn't with me for my cancer, but when I get sick, sometimes she's like, "I've seen it way worse. You're fine." No,
Oh, for sure. They can have such an amazing bedside manner at work. And then when your wife comes home, you don't get the best bedside manner at times, but we tend to joke about that quite a bit.
yeah. So I know you had RPLND. So talk about the decision I think you avoided chemo, right?
Gratefully, was able to avoid chemo. Yes, the tumor board reviewed the case because the RPLND was almost a year to the day after my orchie. And the tumor board was looking at a lot of different things with this, and they said that the RPLND was going to be the best option because here in Omaha at University of Nebraska Medical Center is where they performed the robotic one. And over the course of the last year and a half, I found out how, I don't know if rare is the best word, but the robotic RPLND does not seem to be nearly as prevalent as the one where they open you up completely. So I was able to avoid chemo. I was able to avoid radiation, but there are times that I kind of wonder, was that the best option? They say it was, and I'm healthy, and there's been no recurrence since then, but that is a very involved surgery, even on the robotic side of things. It's like 3.5 hour surgery on robotic, and then when they open you up, it's like 6 to 7 hours. But that was a longer recovery. Because of the very strict low-fat diet that you're put on for the month after the RPLND. For the first week, you can have no more than 5 grams of fat per day. And I'm curious, Stephen, are you, in your own experience, did you have any experience with the RPLND?
I did have the RPLND. The low-fat diet wasn't something that was mentioned to me. And I think maybe that was just Dr. Carey's preference at IU. I'm not entirely sure. I can't speak for him, but I probably eat 5 grams of fat in every bite. So that would have been a huge change for me.
See, I'm real curious about that because that seems to be something that some medical teams really hit pretty heavy on with the nutritionists. And I've talked to others who said, no, I was eating a steak within the first week. And I guess I was just too nervous and really wanted to adhere to that. But yeah, the 5 grams of fat per day, anyone listening to this, I just challenge, go to your fridge and just look at anything in there and see what you can do. It was a lot of fat-free cottage cheese and bell peppers. It was a bland first week. I will say that.
Yeah, it's definitely probably better for you to do that even without having a surgery, but I don't know. So the year between the orchiectomy and the RPLND, what was it like? Was it pretty close surveillance? Was chemo ever on the table in that year, or was it strictly just like wait and see?
It was close surveillance. My oncologist here is amazing. And so we were staying on top with the blood work. We were staying on top with the different scans. And I never felt like I was doing the wrong thing by going with surveillance. And they say that if you're going to go with a surveillance plan, make sure you're hitting all of the appointments. Don't just put it off. The surveillance is what led to going from the regular CT to doing that PET scan, which is what led to the RPLND.
So what was it that prompted the RPLND a year later? Did something show up?
Yes, they had been monitoring a couple of the lymph nodes, and they were fluctuating in size a little bit. Plus, there had been a nodule on my lung that they were kind of concerned with. They wanted to make sure that wasn't changing shape at all. The lung nodule has not changed shape in the last 3 years. Apparently, this is one of those things that may be common for guys in the Midwest, is what they were saying, that sometimes it's being around certain areas with livestock or whatever that can contribute to some of those benign lung nodules. But what led to it was the 2 or 3 lymph nodes that had started to show a bit more growth. And while one had kind of gone down a little bit, there were a couple that were just getting bigger, but at a slow enough rate where they weren't concerned about the time frame on it. And I say that because with the Orchie, it was, we don't want to wait more than 2 weeks to go in there and remove the testicle. But with the RPLND, when they made the decision, it was, well, we've got like 45 days to be able to schedule this. It's not growing at a rate that's going to be concerning if we get it out this month or next month. The PET scan is what really kind of set it off, though. And it's part of the thing that I talk about in my book. And I know that there are different schools of thought when it comes to, sugar and cancer. But for me, what really got me thinking was, they inject you with that like radioactive sucralose, and, that kind of binds itself and attaches itself to the malignant areas. And that's what really lights up on the PET scan. And so I was like, well, okay, well, if the cancer is sucking in, the sucralose, and it's really attracting the sugar stuff, and that's what's going to make it light up, potentially make it grow a little bit. I was like, well, maybe leading up to my RPLND, I need to kind of cut out the sugar a little bit just to make sure that there's no additional growth. Again, I know there are different medical opinions on this one, and I'm sure you're well aware in your experience and all the different people you've talked to about, some people are like absolutely no sugar, and some people say that there's no effect on that. So I'm not going to be an expert on it, but for me personally, I just decided to cut it out up until then, and whatever course of action I took after the RPLND, there was no additional spread when they took out all the different lymph nodes. So I don't know, maybe it played a role, maybe it didn't, but I don't think there was anything wrong in just taking that extra precaution.
Yeah, I'm not an expert either, and yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think avoiding sugar in general is probably a good thing. Like I said, I eat 5 grams of fat probably in every bite, which is a problem, and it's going to catch up with me. So if I ever don't post an episode, I might have had a sugar overdose or something. The recovery from the RPLND, you touched on it a little bit. Were you able to work through it, or did you take some time off?
I did take some time off. Since COVID, I've worked for a financial company where they sold off their building and we went remote. So I've been remote work for 5 years. So I was able to, within a week after my surgery, kind of come back to this chair and do a little bit of work. It was painful. I will say, having an RPLND, I'm going to attribute it to being in my 40s. It sucked. The recovery took longer than I expected. I probably for the first 10 days, I slept in a recliner just because that was the easiest to get up and to move around, but also the only way I was able to be comfortable sleeping. And it just, I took a lot of naps because I wasn't getting the best amount of sleep, and I was having to stay pretty consistent on the pain medication. The Orchie was easy in comparison to that. Not that I was running any marathons afterwards, but yeah, the recovery for the RPLND took a bit of time. I was thankful I was able to get back to work, but again, I'm sitting in front of a computer and crunching numbers and investigating things. So it's not like I was out there being active. First time I probably got back into the gym was about 4 to 5 weeks after my RPLND, just because I was being a little bit overly cautious. When they explained to me all the different things that happen with the RPLND, like, the arteries that they have to go around and the various nerves and everything, I just was like, ooh, I don't want to overexert myself on any of that.
In your robotic RPLND, were they able to do the nerve sparing technique, or was that something you were concerned about at all, having your 2 kids already?
So I wasn't concerned about it with as far as the kids aspect was concerned, but they did say, hey, this is going to be a potential risk. And, unfortunately they weren't able to spare the nerves. So yeah, even if we wanted kids, that's one thing that's no longer an option. And I kind of talk about a little bit of like the anger and the resentment in the book, because while functionally, everything is, good for on that. There's just there's never going to be anything firing out is how I wrote it down. So I foolishly, that was one thing I didn't ask enough questions on, because I thought that was something that would come back. And I was talking with one of the guys who is in the Testicular Cancer Foundation, a little chat group that I'm in. And, he's a doctor, and he said, no, that doesn't come back. That's something that they should have explained a little bit more. It's not a temporary thing. So I would say that's probably outside of the physical scars, that's the one thing that has mentally needed a bit of an adjustment, just knowing that, okay, well, even if I wanted kids, it would have to be an entirely different way about, going about it.
And you mentioned the mental with that, and just let's talk about mental in general. I mean, after RPLND, are you still being surveilled? Do you get this anxiety? Let's, elaborate on that.
Yeah, still being surveilled. Just this last year, we finally hit the point where it's like, okay, now you can come in every 6 to 12 months. And, it's been clean scans and clean blood work since the RPLND. The scanxiety is always there to some extent. I think it's a double-edged sword, because what's great about the scans is, we will know sooner than most guys, hey, is there something going on? Even if it's not cancer, you get to the CT, with the kidneys and liver and all these other things. And I've had some additional stuff with ECG. And so it's like, I've had basically everything checked out over the last few years. And so I know heart health and all my internal organs, and it's great. But also there's sometimes where you go, I don't know if I want to know about this stuff. And what happens if there's something different? My anxiety was always around that lung nodule. What happens if that starts to grow? Because one of the friends I had who the cancer spread into the lungs, that's a whole other thing. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with that. And that scared me. And there are times where I go, I felt, I guess, a little bit of a survivorship guilt, because I'm like, I had this stage 1. There are guys I've talked to that have had it much, much more spread. And one that I got to know and wrote about a little bit in the book, that it went up into his brain. And so that always makes it a little bit nervous with the scans. But overall, it's better to know than to not know and to catch something a lot later.
Yeah. I find it interesting too, like on the scan, sometimes it's read by different radiologists, and maybe they have a different threshold for something that they'll note. So like sometimes I think they'll note like a benign little cyst on the kidney or something, and it's nothing, but they note it, so it's scary. But then the next one, maybe that person doesn't note it, or like I've got some bony sclerosis or something in one of my vertebrae, and they're noting those kinds of things, and then that kind of is an alarm bell. So yeah, the scans are terrifying.
Well, exactly. I had the scan leading up to the RPLND, the one that read it, wrote, almost a paragraph about something going on with my spleen. And I talked to the oncologist about that, because I was nervous about having to get my spleen removed. And he read it and he goes, oh no, that's not the problem. He's like, it's your lymph nodes that are the issue. I was like, so yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes the way that they write and review it can lead you to worry about things that aren't even a problem.
Yeah. I talked to, I don't know if you listened to the episode with Dr. Richard Matulewicz, but or Matulevich. I pronounced that wrong. Anyway, so he talked about, I guess there's some law that enables the patient to have the rights to their information. That's why we were able to get it before the doctor necessarily reviews it. So that's interesting, I thought too.
Yeah. In your own personal experience, do you have like one chart where you're able to see that before the doctor would even call you?
Yeah. So I don't know for what it's called for you, but for me, it's called My Chart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to give a shout out to any of your medical centers? I think you mentioned the University of Nebraska. I don't think geographically we've talked to anybody who's kind of in Nebraska. So anybody who's listening that might be in that area,
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, my oncologist is at Bellevue Medical Center, which is just south of Omaha. But UNMC and the Warren Buffett Cancer Center, absolutely amazing teams there. Like from the urologist to the different oncologists and the surgical teams, and especially the team that did my robotic RPLND, like Dr. LaGrange, who did the RPLND. I kind of joke that he reminded me a little bit of Dr. House. But again, that's what I like in surgeons, is the guys that are just absolutely no nonsense and knew exactly what he was doing. And want to go back to that nerve sparing thing for just a second. Sometimes, depending on where the lymph nodes are, there's just not a way to spare those nerves. So he did everything absolutely right, and unfortunately, that was just a situation where that nerve had to take a little bit of damage. But yeah, the medical team here at UNMC, I would have to say, if you guys are in the Midwest, I know that there's a lot of different teams that you can go to, but man, I had the best experience on both surgeries.
With your RPLND, did the pathology come back that it was active cancer, or was mine was scar tissue that came back, but there's no way to know that till they take it out.
There's no way to know that till they take it out. And, that's really weird. They didn't say anything about scar tissue. What they said was there was no cancer present. So they said it was there. And then, with all the scans, with all of the testing, they're like, yeah, that's cancer. I mean, that these professionals are looking and saying that's cancer. When the pathology came back, because they took out somewhere between 30 and 40 lymph nodes, each section, they're like, no cancer in any of these. And, I talk a little bit about in the book, like there's some different things that I did, some different supplements. I'm a guy of faith. And so I'm sitting there going, okay, what maybe led to that? Or what combination of things led to that? And I talked to Dr. LaGrange and I say, what did we need the surgery? And he's like, yes, you still needed this. He's like, this is the best case scenario here is, we take this out and there's no more sign of cancer. He's like, the worst thing you could have done is not have the surgery. Those lymph nodes continue to grow. He goes, sometimes this is what happens. And the pathology comes back and it doesn't show, any additional spread. It doesn't show anything there. He's like, we don't necessarily know all the reasons why. So my own personal thing is I like to think and attribute that to basically everything that was going on, from supplements and prayer and all of this other stuff to just being very fortunate. But yeah, no additional spread was found. I'm just dozens of lymph nodes lighter now, and I've got looked like I'd been bitten by a shark on my lower abdomen because of the orchie, the RPLND. I'd also had my gallbladder removed. So there's just all sorts of tiny scars down there now.
Yeah, very interesting. I do want to talk about the book, but before that, let's talk about, do you have any advice for guys who maybe have just found this podcast as a resource, have just been diagnosed?
So for anybody who's just been diagnosed, I think the biggest thing to know is that there's going to be hope and there are going to be opportunities for you. That a diagnosis does not mean an end to life as you know it. It does not mean an end to even the opportunity of being a dad or, having a thriving lifestyle. And I would say consume as many resources as possible and get involved with as many groups as possible. If your local hospital, an oncology team, if they have a support group, if they've got a cancer support group, I sought out anything that said testicular cancer to be like, hey, what other information can I get? So that's, when I found you guys and found your podcast, that was awesome. When I found the Testicular Cancer Foundation, that was awesome. And I just tried to jump right into as much as possible. So that's what I would suggest for other guys is just do what you can to consume the information and stay off of Google. That's not going to be your friend.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about your book, Nut Up or Shut Up. Where can people find it? Tell us about, the process of writing it, everything that we need to know.
Yeah. So Nut Up or Shut Up, it's on Amazon. Just Google that, look up on Amazon there. That's where it's primarily located. As far as the process of writing the book, it was something that I wanted to do two things. One, I wanted to share my story and process, because while I was grateful for finding, this podcast, and I was grateful for the resources that I had, testicular cancer doesn't have as much awareness, I feel, as some of the other cancers. And I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but it really seems like there's not as much out there. I mean, you've got, I love the kids book, What's Wrong with Billy's Balls, that you've got back there. That's awesome. When I saw that getting promoted, I was like, man, that's great. But even the oncologist said, there's support for breast cancer, there's support for some of these others, which absolutely. And especially when you think of things like childhood cancers and, what St. Jude and some of these other places do, it's like they absolutely need support. And that's one thing that I've really wanted to do, is volunteer for a lot of those other ones too, because, man, any type of cancer. But in writing this book, I just wanted to provide something for guys, that not only for them, but for their families who are going through it, to say, hey, you're going to get through this. This isn't all inclusive in all of the different, treatments and everything. This is my research. This is also a way to honor a handful of guys that I know who went through TC. And there's even a story in here about a man who, it wasn't testicular cancer, but somebody, he passed in 2019, and, devoted husband, father of four. And I saw the way that he handled his cancer up to the very end. And it's what encouraged me and inspired me. A man by the name of Tim, he encouraged me and inspired me to go, okay, if he can stand and face a terminal cancer and be this source of strength for his family and those around him, then whatever comes my way with testicular cancer, I can do the same thing. And if I get out of this is what this book is about. It's like, I want to give hope. I wanted to give some information, want to give some resources, and also say, it's okay to joke about testicular cancer a little bit too. One of my friends, after I was recovering from my orchie, and I write about that in there, he brings me a gift, and it's just this giant sack of Mounds and Almond Joy. He goes, because sometimes you feel like a nut and sometimes you don't. So all sorts of things there. It's just the process of writing it was just trying to figure out what to add in there and what was going to be important. Like, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew a little bit of the history about these things, but also just as if I'm explaining it to my teenager. I wanted to make it easily accessible and easily accessible for families of guys going through it too.
Awesome. I need to get a copy from my shelf here of books from past guests. So I'll have to do that. Well,
I tell you what, I'll sign a copy and I'll send it your way.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I can do the same with Billy's Balls if you want one too.
Definitely. I will say one thing when it comes to testicular cancer is being more open talking about this, is telling my kids when it's okay and when it's not okay to also talk about testicles. Again, I've got an 11-year-old son, so he's at that age where no matter what, it's going to be kind of, it's like, hey, don't say certain things in mixed company about that.
Mike, where can people find you if they want to reach out and learn more?
Well, I am on Instagram. The handle is Kicking Cancer in the Balls, as it says here on the t-shirt. Just love that. Otherwise, I would say just find it on Instagram or getting the book on Amazon. For my own personal mental health, I've decided not to be on too much of social media. I think that's best for all of us. But yeah, find me there. I'll post things. I'll post some good things about my dogs, or just about scans, or sometimes updates on different things regarding the cancer.
Sweet. Mike Knebel, thank you so much for being on It Takes Balls.
Hey, thanks for having me, Stephen.
For more information and resources for your testicular cancer journey, visit testicularcancerawarenessfoundation.org.